Oh, yeah. Guess what time it is? Oh, extra horns today. Because it's got Tom on Tom. Rohan is coming out for this junk. That's right. Tom Bombadil just showed up in Middle Earth and some Burrowites. I'm just saying. Episode 4, Rings of Power Season 2. And Bezos and peeps were just like, where did Peter Jackson wuss out? Tom Bombadil. And he's like, I want that. I want to do that. And it better not suck. And it didn't. So here we are. What's up, Nick?
I'm just feeling lucky that in the billions of year history of the cosmos, we get to live in the very short window where we get to see not only Tom Bombadil on the page, but Tom Bombadil on the screen. I mean, yes. Come
on. Oh, man. Many people have gone to Middle Earth just on the page. And when they've gone to Middle Earth and they get to meet Tom Bombadil. But all the adventures that you've had on screen, they didn't have Tom Bombadil. They didn't have someone in the flesh. It definitely didn't have Rufus Wainwright sing the song. No. And so that's what I'm saying. If people were upset after this, you know what they would have done? They wouldn't have like listened to Bilbo. I'm going on an adventure. No, they would have said no. I don't want to. I'm just gonna be mad. I don't want to go on an adventure. I want to see Tom Bombadil. I'm gonna stay here and
read my mail.
Do my dishes. And when old Sharky shows up, I'm gonna obey his directions.
Dang. Comparing people to Sharky followers. Ooh,
Sharky
harsh.
Followers. Yeah. And if people complain about Tom Bombadil and were triggered by elves with skin pigmentation, then you're just sour. Just saying. Get
that mark off your neck, all right? Burn it off.
Yeah.
Burn it off.
I don't want anyone to hurt you. Do it metaphorically. We aren't suggesting burns. But this week we got a friend joining us, Nick.
I mean, we've talked about Toms, and we've got another fantastic Tom. Maybe as good as Tom Bombadil. Maybe even better. I don't know.
Ooh. I don't know if I'd go that far.
But we've got Tom Webster this week.
Yeah.
For a little Tom on Tom action.
Yeah, and even you get a horn. It might just be your first name. We don't know yet. We'll find out in the end. It was a good idea, but Tom is not just also someone with a PhD in philosophy and religion, because that qualifies you to have hot takes about Tom Bombadil. No, it's also his beard. That helps you have one, and it's his namesake. Plus, Tom and his dad co-wrote an article on religion and Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm just saying, there's a host of reasons. Now, I'm going to show y'all something. Nick and I had this idea for Theology Beer Camp for a little Tolkien moment, late night. A Tolkien Lord of the Rings liturgy of sorts, and something arrived in the mail today.
Oh, shoot, dude. I'm not even ready. Let's go.
Oh yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
Yes, please.
I've been going through. I've been going through different cigar blends and working to find one that is worthy. And y'all have seen the Lord of the Rings based or adjacent, I think would be the correct IP language. Lord of the Rings adjacent artwork that will be on the cigar bands for Tolkien Liturgy Time at Theology Beer Camp. But the cigars came today.
So they're going to be custom bands on those cigars?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
And
I appreciate all the research you've done for this.
Oh, I put in the research. And I have to say, sometimes when it gets to Theology Beer Camp, which everyone's more than welcome to come, October 17th and 19th in Denver, Colorado, theologybeer.camp's website. The nerd stage, has all the theology nerd stuff at it. Then you have like the main stage to do all this different stuff. Then there's the geek stage, and there's always some Tolkien on it, among other things.
And we will be having little books of little common prayer, Tolkien style. So cigars, Tolkien prayer books, and Tom Webster, and D&D, and costume contest.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
and Tom's job for Orbis Press, which is a publisher of a lot of progressive Catholic justice-centered text, and in particular, one of the major publishers in the United States on thinking about environmentalism, justice, engaging science and religion, all that kind of stuff. We thought, well, what better press to do these prizes for the Lord of the Rings themed cosplay contest opening night at Theology Beer Camp. So I'm just saying, hymns. Oh, Brandon.
Come one, come all, dress up. We're taking the Catholic privilege to judge Tolkien cosplay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I'm passing on a joke. All right.
It may even lead to the beatification of Tolkien. I'm just saying it could happen. It could happen.
Well, that is when the internet gets a hold of the liturgy for the cigar. Our idea originally, but I don't know. We're just going to do whatever Nick says. Is some way of doing little short reading and toast to all the people in the fellowship, where there's a virtue attached to the persons who are all like smoking cigars and hanging out, and then every so often there's a little bit, and it just makes it technically a ritual.
I like it.
Yeah.
So then it's like gonna be so postmodern. Tolkien's uncomfortable.
He would hate it.
He would hate it.
Make folk mass look normal.
Yeah. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I made a little outline of the stuff that happened in episode 3, because since we're not doing 3 episodes tonight, we can actually talk about most of what happens. But we're going to skip all Tom Bombadil scenes and basically save Tom Bombadil for part 2, second half of this conversation, because all 3 of us love Tom Bombadil.
Amen.
I'm just saying. But before we get going, not Tom Bombadil. Tom, do you want to, other than the fact that you work at Orbis, thought somehow to convince your bosses they should sponsor an event where people wear Lord of the Rings cosplay, have an article on D&D that you wrote with your dad and are a theology professor? Do you want to say about a little bit about your connection to Tolkien and such, so there's a reference point, because 3 of us all know each other. Everyone may not know you yet.
Yeah, thank you. So when you have a dad who's a pastor who'll write chapters about D&D and spiritual formation, is a pretty good bet that he also will introduce you to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit when you're like 6. I think I'd read the whole trilogy by the time I was 11 or 12 for the first time. Didn't understand it at all, guarantee you. And then the movies, I was in middle school, I think, when the first one came out, and it was just, it's magic, getting to see it all. And then learned my dad was like hardcore Tolkien. Like, he had the parody Board of the Rings
Let's go
book in his like pastor's study. And he had illustrated hobbits from like a couple different countries. And so came from a big Tolkien lover, and just kind of fell in love with it. And then, especially like as I grew up studying theology, my PhD's in eco-theology and environmental justice. And I just kept seeing that over and over in Tolkien, and that just kept me coming back. I think I tried the ultimate one. I think I tried the Celebrimbor maybe when I was like 14 or 15, and my dad just laughed at me. But I got to like page 20.
It's impressive.
And then haven't I did it. I actually like got through it when I was in seminary. But yeah, so that's my connection. It's real old, and it's from like my dad had a Frodo Lives button and everything. So yeah, it's deep.
Yeah,
Awesome.
you've got a fandom pedigree right there. That's what you have, sir.
Yeah, and I mean it'd be indecent, but Tom could show you his Smeagol tattoo, but it's a live stream.
Circus crawling up your glute is just it's an image.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, I only saw it once, but if you just imagine Smeagol when he's getting all lusty after a catfish, and he's like this, and
I mean, and he did tunnel. He did tunnel. So,
and he's just sitting there with his catfish, all just smacking it around, and he's just like it just has his face there, a little holding the fish, and it just says juicy and sweet. And I'm like, Tom, I know you love Tolkien, you got a lifelong connection. If I was going to get a Tolkien tattoo, I wouldn't get juicy and sweet Smeagol at a place we can't share on the internet. So, all right. So, at the beginning of this episode, I made bullet points. I'm going to attempt to summarize this. Y'all may tell me, Trip, never do this again. Because whether or not my bullet points turn into a summary that provokes conversation, we don't know yet. But this podcast is not the one that's my job. This is just for sheer joy. So this is the moments in the elf plot line. All right, so it starts out. You got Commander Elrond getting all uppity with his new power because he's like, I don't trust you, Gladriel. You got all that sketch, sus, look at the ring and junk. We're going to have to reorganize the power. You know why? Because Daddy Glorfindel, right before the last episode ended, is like, you're going with him and he's in charge, but I'll still trust you to find some archers and swordsmen, but I won't take any advice, especially if you look staringly at that ring. And so then she's like, all right, I'll help you out and stuff. Well, then they start going down their little road. They're all like checking it out. Oh, look, a giant bridge is broken. And it's theoretically over the Brandywine, which doesn't have that giant of a gap in it, but this is before Numenor floods. This is my universe explanation for how you would get the movement of tectonic plates enough to do. There's a giant, spoiler alert, in some point in the next 4 seasons, something's going to go down with Numenor where there's large movements of bodies of water, and it could move things around, just how like the Ark got moved around and left an Ararat or whatever.
Oh, wow.
I saw a meme on a fundamentalist Instagram thing of like X-ray on a big mountain in Turkey, and they're like, the Muslims won't let us in to verify that the Ark's there. And I was like, you clearly have not read the Quran. Anyway, nonetheless, so the Brandywine has this giant gorge on it, and there's something broken. They're going to have to go north or south, and Gladriel gets a little a ring-a-ding-ding from whatever's going on in her ring, and she's like, whoa, we can't go this way. Stuff looks super sketch. And Elrond's like, well, it's opposite day, and I'm in charge. We're going to go there. So then they go, and boom, shakalaka, Barrow-wights are there. The condensed timing of this show makes the Barrow-wights being there kind of odd. Couldn't we just call them whites? Couldn't we call them anything else? It doesn't matter because they're on the freaking screen, and it's like a mix between creepy-ass dead things with, like, chains flipping out, which took the black guy out first, and which the people that normally complain should like that because they're racist. But you're sitting there and you're like, but they look so freaking cool. It's like one level scarier than the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but not like so scary that I ran and hid, like when that spider was on the screen in the first 3 episodes drop, where I'm just like, I ain't got time for kick. So they get this battle of the Barrow-wights. Elrond, high quality arcane check, natural 20, and says, whoa, Galadriel, You know what you got to do? You got to kill them with the weapons they have. Go get one. Cock, 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 cock. He knows that even though she has the ring and he doesn't trust her, you give homegirl a weapon that gives kill shots, and she's just like, taking them junks out. And so they head off, and she's like, I bet Sauron woke them up, because she's all emo and junk. She's like really feisty emo. That's all going good. Then what happens? Oh, they have another oath. That's right. Elrond and Galadriel, they start debating. Oh, we lost somebody. How are we going to do this? How's this going to work out? I hope things don't go south. Oh, but they do, because there's freaking drums. The little orc drummer boy is rocking it up. It's getting all pumpy up in this piece. And then what happens? What happens? Oh, they're shooting arrows at a random horse. But this horse has got agility off the chain. It's like, ka, 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 showing them hooves. And we know what happens when Galadriel gets near a horse. She's like, can I ride that junk? We remember that season 1. She's never been someone more excited to ride a horse. Just, oh, give me that horse. And you're like, how far's the ride, Isildur? And, you know, you're just ready to get on a horse. So she's like, here, you take the ring, Elfies. Y'all got to go let Gil-galad know what's up, because Mama Bear's down to hunt. I got some orc time. Let me get at this. And she's like, hey, she got on her phone like while she was about to film it, and she called up Orlando Bloom. She's like, Orlando, you chump. And he's like, what are you talking about? I like went up an elephant. And he's like trying to see, you got nothing. Check season 2. And then she's like, fa, 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 throw the light up, shoot the arrow through, get on it, swing in chains, all that junk. She's like slaughtering up in that piece. And then Adar puts out the fire, and he's like, what's up? We got to talk. In. That's the elf plot line from this episode, with my random asides. Now y'all can say things.
Well done. I loved it. The best is the trip, like enter the ka 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 ka. Like those are my favorite.
Was
All
this
right, Nick.
Was this the first time that we've seen Barrow-wights like in a film adaptation? I'm sure the Soviets had a Barrow-wight in their thing. They had Tom Bombadil too, but I'm trying to remember if the Rankin and Bass did, because I have this like image in the back of my head, like from when I was a kid, and maybe it was one of the illustrated versions of The Hobbit or something. And they were like haunting nightmare fuel for like a 7-year-old having The Hobbit, read to him as a bedtime story. And so I like finally seeing them on screen. I kind of didn't care that the timeline didn't work.
Well, and I think it is. I think it is the first time, because it was Ralph Bakshi he had the Fellowship and the Two Towers and put them into one thing, and then of course Rankin and Bass got The Hobbit in Return of the King, and neither Whites are in either of those. And I don't think Bakshi did the Barrow-wights. I think that he did. I think the closest thing he did was the Nazgul. And so I think this is the first time we have Barrow-wights on screen and adapted, as far as like big someone who has like the legal rights and stuff like that. And I was so like time wise, here's the part like that's a discrepancy, is like the old burrows are from the first age. So like ancient kings buried, right? So that part makes sense. It's not until the third age when the Witch King sends evil spirits into those whites to like make them come about that comes in. But for me, that's like really splitting hairs. And I think because the barrows are there and Sauron's back, I don't see a huge, like you said, there's not like the leap from Sauron doing necromancy to like waiting till the Witch King isn't that huge of a leap for me. And they looked awesome.
Oh, they looked fantastic. Like that.
That's what I'm talking about. They look great.
They look great.
Here, sometimes this is why we can't have nice things. Like, does anyone think, given how much money IP makes, that people are going to stop making Tolkien stuff? No. Because it would either require somebody who didn't write it who's just going to make bank when people redo it, to be like, nah, I would like to get a job, or people to stop liking Lord of the Rings. Like, how many things do both vice presidential candidates have in common? They both love Lord of the Rings.
True.
You know, so I'm just saying, it brings the people together. It makes everyone money. So they're going to keep doing it. Eventually, we'll get every version of everything, and some will be better or worse. But you want to know, no one had done? Didn't have no Barrow Weiss and Tom Bombadil, and we got it. So let's just chill out. Let's just chill out. And every scene, do you think, like, I think I could have done better? You couldn't, because you couldn't hire Brer McCreary. And let's just go ahead and admit, if you don't like something, close your eyes, because the music is freaking good. It is.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
I listen to it when I'm driving to work.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah. That's it's that good. I mean, it hit the charts. I mean, when's the last time a TV or movie score hit the charts? I can't remember.
Probably Howard Shore with Return.
Literally. like Trip was saying, if we want an economic boom, we want peace in the country globally. Come together. Love Lord of the Rings.
So, okay. Here's my question about the elf line, the elf thread, right? So we don't have a whole lot in the material the showrunners are working with about the intricacies of the Elrond Galadriel relationship that you get in the Second Age. Also, Tolkien was leveling up her role throughout the Second Age when he passed.
Right.
So we knew he wanted it bigger. So part of this could be following his kind of later intuitions, right, and making her role bigger, just like the orcs throughout this show are they're the later Tolkien version of orcs. Like, they need to be created by Eru Iluvatar. They have to share the same fire. That's why you have mommy orcs and baby orcs. Like, so if you know kind of like where he was at when he died, you only really can work with stuff from Lord of the Rings unless you get the permission. Right. Then the biggest shift in their relationship is just she's not married yet, or she is and things got rough and was distracted by hot Sauron. And because later Elrond's going to marry her kid.
Right.
Which is in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know they're old, and so, but still, so apart from that one bit, to me, the whole way their relationship is playing out, given the way they're signaling Sauron's use with the ring, right? Like, unlike them being created third after he leaves, you get the creation of the Elven rings first in a different order, but he doesn't touch the mithril right before it goes in, or steal the mithril, depending on what happened last in the 3-episode drop when he did the little magician move.
Right.
And so it's sitting there with the question that everyone, if you've only watched movies, you see Galadriel face, is what happens if you actually possess the power to meet your desire? And she chooses not to claim it, right? Like, she passes the test there, but it's a genuine test for her, right? You see her light up, getting all freaky and junk, like Barrow White scary. And she lets it go. I'm going to recede. It's going to be the end of the elves on Middle Earth. Like, she says yes to the whole thing, going off with Círdan at the very end of the film. So, like, we know all this is sitting there, and so they don't know the logic of how these rings work yet. So he's suspicious of it. She's trusting it. But combined, the not being on the same page leads to the death and these poor decisions, and then her getting captured. Like, if you understand, like, Lord of the Rings, if you don't notice it, good guys work when they cooperate. It's kind of like you need a fellowship to undermine, through genuine friendship and solidarity, the deep, great, evil, dark power that's threatening the world. And here you have two people who are destined to be the elvish thread to the whole thing, trying to work out their junk around a ring and everything. And I'm just sitting there going, how? I mean, I've watched people on the internet all complaining about this. I'm like, what do you want them to do? Like, ask Bezos for an extra $1 billion to buy the Silmarillion, spend 9 seasons making it with different humans every episode? If you know what's in the story, here's what I've decided. These are fundamentalists. They're the worst kind of people that enjoy anything. They're the kind of people, if Jesus got up and someone made a modern telling of the Good Samaritan story, they were like, we aren't even in, did you see Samaria? Was anyone on a road to Jericho? And you're like, no, it's a modern telling of the parable of the Good Samaritan. They're like, what was his name? Do we know his name? When you had 3 people go by, 3's fine. I would have hated if it was 4, but there was no one that worked at the temple among these 3 people that walked by the person. You're like, but it's set in Georgia in the 60s, and there was no temple in Georgia. That's a problem. That's a problem. And so, like, there's a difference between, like, weird Bible trivia and actually getting the vibe of what Jesus is talking about in a parable. So sometimes you actually get the vibe right, like what he's actually saying, like crossing boundaries, like you become a good Samaritan. Like, you could do the same thing with Tolkien. You could be obsessed with the trivia, which I made jokes about the trivia bits in a sense when the way I told it, like, all the Burrow says, blah, 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 blah. But the vibe, I think, is doing a really good job chasing the vibe. Philosophers would say you make a form content distinction, and sometimes people are obsessed with purity of form and miss the fact that the content doesn't mean the same thing if you keep the form over time, or like the character of a person. If you're giving a eulogy, sometimes you combine stories when you're giving a eulogy to get at the character, and everyone goes, that's true, even though it's an amalgamation. I'm just saying, if you take what the people use and then you watch this episode, I thought I actually see the beginning of a relationship with Elrond and Galadriel that makes sense of how they are the two working with it, like working in the council at the end. I mean, what do y'all think about that? That's it. To me, I keep thinking half the people when they are complaining, have a fundamentalist hermeneutic, and I'm just allergic to it in almost all cases, unless it's about the subjective nature of God in part 5 of Process and Reality.
Tom, I want to hear your take.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Trip. I think one of the things that stood out to me, I was really not liking Elrond in the 3rd episode. And I think it's because he didn't actually have that tension with Galadriel to complexify it. Like, it was just a really one-dimensional mistrust, and it was almost childish. And in this episode, one of the things that I think comes across is his rightly earned caution, and that's one of the things that I think I really appreciated about how they're working out this dynamic between the two of them. And I think we're going to see, at least for Galadriel, I think we're going to see her deal with the death of 2 of their company right there. I mean, like, we've not even crossed the river and 2 are already dead. Right. And so I think we're going to see that, and that like multidimensionality of shaping both of them through each other and through relationship. I really like that we finally got to see that, because it also, with Galadriel, it also was that she's no longer just like to use a D&D metaphor, she's no longer just the like 18 and 17 rolled paladin, right? Like, the tank who can just come right through. Like, I think we're about to see the tank actually start wrestling with, oh shit, consequences to me trying to do this alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that aloneness, like you were talking about this, we talked about cooperation and then even like the dynamics within the show, but how it's obviously an adaptation of what Tolkien's doing, not only in like what's considered canon, but like what he does throughout his entire life, which people like Tolkien took this, like, as we all do, this kind of paradoxical approach to text where it's very serious, but also very loose at the same time. Where, one day you ask Tolkien, you're like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, I don't know. And then you're like, cool. So this is probably what happened. And he's like, how dare you? You obviously don't understand the nature of Middle Earth, whatever. But, and I think what we don't know is that how Tolkien framed these stories is that they're translations, they're discovered texts that people from all different races and traditions across time kind of jot stuff down. Stuff's written in the margins. There's oral traditions. And Tolkien was like, yeah, this is how history works and myth, even in our real world. Like,
Yeah.
every time we think we've got history, we've got myth figured out, that's when you don't. And, and this is, I texted Tom and Trip. I was looking at the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and I won't skip too far ahead. But the Adventures of Tom Bombadil are from the Red Book of Westmarch, which is stuff that has like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and Bilbo compiled with Frodo and Sam and other hobbits. And basically, a lot of the stories in there, Tolkien has a preface, and he goes, "Yeah, there's some of the stuff that like the hobbits were like they just made shit up, and that's cool because that's what all cultures do, and it doesn't make the stories any less awesome." And I think that when we look at Rings of Power, there's things we can dislike. Like there's things in this that I told Trip, this is probably my least favorite episode, episode 4, but it doesn't mean it wasn't a good story and that it's not leading into things. Like you said too about Elrond, like you weren't feeling it around 3, but we're seeing where they're going with it. And I think that for some reason when we encounter something we don't like with Rings of Power, but anything really, we're like, they obviously don't care, they're not paying attention. And if we actually step back, recognize where our emotions are coming from, our memories and all that stuff, we say, no, they are paying attention. They're just taking it in a direction that we don't expect because we've never had anything like this before.
I think of it like when you got someone that's singing a special music at church or like divinity student preaching, and when they start singing or preaching, and like, oh, they don't normally sing in public, or oh, they're in the middle of div school, they probably don't even know if they believe in God right now, but we're going to let them preach, so let's see what happens. You start the sermon or the song praying that they just don't fail, right? And then you go, oh, they prepared. Oh, like she can hit the notes in this key. And so then you like decide, like, am I going to start enjoying this? And then they start going along. And then by the end, you're like, that was really good. I don't know what I was so worried about, except for the fact of how many times it's gone bad before. You know why you were worried about it. And I think that's how people have been with Rings of Power.
Right.
And this episode made me feel more like, oh, there are things I liked about it. And then there are things I liked about liking about it. Like, obviously, the greatest addition to like the legendarium, Waldrick, maker of Mordor, and I'm obviously anticipating his resurrection. I'm currently projecting it happening at the beginning of season 3, kind of like in House of Dragon, not House of Dragon, Game of Thrones, when Jon Snow comes back, because they're kind of similar ranked characters.
Yeah.
Though Waldrick is just better looking because he's got that. Yeah, he's got that Aussie vibe to him. Like, he's worked the Outback before. Okay, so one other thing about this. This is because Nick and I were rereading books 1 and 2 recently. Elrond, at the Council of Elrond, greatest chapter in a fiction book of all time, if it's fiction, is... emphasizes we're not taking oaths. And so all the members of the fellowship can go as long as they tarry, right? Like, no one has to go to the end, and he resists taking oath. If you think so much of this episode and so much of the first 2 seasons has been setting up things that if you read Fellowship of the Rings, you get this episode gets like, why are we not taking oaths? In the last 2 episodes, like that moment Tom talked about Elrond and Galadriel, like this seems like a childish conversation, right? Because they're pulling, oh, well, you promised this before, right? And then it comes back up in this episode, but the resolution is going like, look, I see it this way, you see it this way, is what Elrond's saying here. But I'm like, I'm not gonna like run around and save you if it's involving Sauron. Like, we have a thing that moves us past our contrast, like our tension here. We both are down to take out Sauron. The end of this story, like these are the 2 elves on Middle Earth, like rolling deep to stick it to Sauron. The fact that they have this tension and stuff, and it moves past, like, we're going to move past bickering, and we're going to be on the same page because we're both going to take out Sauron, even though I don't trust the ring. And she's like, even though I do. And he's like, that's fine. We both like riding horses. So, and later I'm going to marry your child. But like, even that little bit, as someone who just had recently read that section, you can see why he would look at people beginning a journey where you're going to face everything Sauron brings. And he goes, no oaths. We don't need anyone here going like, well, Boromir, you said this, or Frodo, you said this, or whatever, you said this. You want them going without coercion, that the reason they're showing up is the relationships. And then you say, how did these 2 elves who were using each other's promises to each other to coerce the other one onto their page get to a point that would never use vows to coerce people, but have a shared goal and say, when you can keep showing up in integrity, you can be a part of what I'm up to, and I'll be a part of what you are. I'm just like, come on. It's sitting right there. It's just right there in the show. And when people, if you don't like it, then it's fine. But like, that's one of those tensions you're taking up with Tolkien, because it's literally what they do at the Council of Elrond. It's like, right. No, we're not doing oaths. Everyone else there was down to take oaths. Gandalf and Elrond are like, we're not doing oaths. Yeah. Why? I don't know. It might seem strange, or it could seem stranger. And that was a bad one because we're shifting to the.
No, that was a great transition because my mind literally went to the stranger. So I wanted you to go into it before we had that discussion.
I know, but we got to do quickly.
Yeah.
The other big plot line.
Yeah.
Which isn't nearly as exciting. All right, because there's really only 2 scenes with Arondir and Theo and Estrid and Isildur.
Except for, well, I'll let you summarize. Because the ends are freaking awesome, dude.
Well, the ends are awesome. Are you trying to steal my thunder? Because I have to come up with an exciting way to talk about that's Mud Snake.
No. Yeah. The mud steak is rough. But I believe in you. I believe in your summary was great. I'm ready for your summary for this line.
Oh, junk. Where is Theo? He helped step up, get a horseback, which we know Galadriel with her ring watched this and was just like, I like this Theo. He loves a horse, because I do too. So Arondir and company, they're like, we got to go find Theo. Where are we going to go do this? And then they have this awkward moment because Isildur is trying to get his riz up on Estrid, and Estrid is just like, I have a small flesh wound. And they're like, whoa, that looks like the Adar sign that kind of looks like the Mordor sign, and I still don't know how they're all related, but nonetheless, you burned it off. How did you do that? Is it for good? Is it for ill? It's a mystery. Woo! Well, it's going to get settled really quick. There's a number of mysteries with Estrid that's going to get settled. At the end of this, we find out she actually wasn't lying about being betrothed, but she was cool pulling a knife on Isildur before... Just a few seconds later, she's like, never mind, I think I like you. So she's a really complicated person. And given what we know of Isildur, I'm going to guess like attracts like. So this is destined for a train wreck. All I got, I don't want to give a spoiler, but if you've seen the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, you know how this is going to end. And Homeboy can't part with something a bit toxic, but it makes him excited. And so he's just trying to my precious that, And Estrid is just being precious as could be. She's hiding her identity. She's probably one of the wild man. But nonetheless, Arondir's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm going to let Isildur call a shot here. And Isildur hopped up on that testosterone, running with his Numenorian, I know how to make water flow game. Not the greatest. Like, you don't put that on your Tinder profile in Middle Earth. It's just like Isildur, kind of friendly with the water, but I trust what the sea's up to. I have a really close relationship with my horse. My sister's super creepy and lost a lot of weight between the 2 seasons, loves to touch balls that give her visions to undermine the rightful queen. And nonetheless, I have some concerns. But don't worry about those, Estrid. I like horses. If a guy likes horses, you gotta trust him. So he's got all his feels. He's not gonna be up there on there. And so Arondir's like, all right, here's the deal. We ran into a giant dirt snake or a Mog monster or a bog bullisk. I don't know what you want to call it, because that was the most disappointing scene in the entire episode. I would have rather not seen the thing or whatever, but it was a mix between, if there were no special effects in episode 4 in the trash compactor, combined with Swiss Family Robinson scene where their zebra is stuck in quicksand, and the girl with short hair, because they're trying to trick the pirates, throws a stick out. If you combine those 2 scenes, but spent millions of dollars to film it with some CGI, that's what happened. Don't know how it worked, but nonetheless, it's set up for the greatest elf daddy joke, or as we should call it, a zaddy joke. This is dinner. Boom. Arondir has jokes. It was awkward, but not as awkward as the mud-slinging worm. And so now they're complicated on who Estrid is. So then he's like, Theo, you can decide if you want to unlock this lock, because she's all creep lying to us or whatever. And Isildur, he has his agenda. He was like, well, we've already had one worm. Let's try another. And so then he's just like, I got to unlock her, and we can save the key for later. And then she just grabs his sword, but like the metal one, and then is about to cut his throat. And Arondir's like, what? I got elf eyes on this junk. And things get awkward. Things get awkward. But not as awkward as they get when Arondir encounters the freaking Ents. Yes, there's freaking Ents, not just Ents, Ent wives. We're talking about a freaking Ent couple, and it's good. The voice actually talks a little faster than it does in the movie, so you don't wish it to get faster, but the vocaling effects is great. Whoever's doing the acting did a great job, because they had to keep up with Gimli doing voice acting for Treebeard. If Treebeard showed up at the end of this, I would have just pooped my pants and gone to bed and rewatched it the next day, because Arondir has this encounter, sets up Estrid Isildur, get that vibe. Things getting weird, but all of a sudden, she's holding a sword. That's triggering to a tree wife. Why? Because humans like to cut a bark. That's right. They like to cut a bark, and Entwife ain't got none of this piece. Things get wild. Arondir and Isildur talk to the Ent and the Entwife, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's Winterbloom. My name is Winterbloom, and I need you to make me a promise. Then let's just go. If we were to grab 30 seconds of this, 30 seconds, not Tom Bombadil energy, but 30 seconds of this, you get Arondir slowly touching Winterbloom, the Entwife's hand. And she's like trying to decide to trust him or not. Have you ever put a blade to a living tree. And we know the one time he did, it's on screen. And he apologizes to the tree. They resist it. They freaking like kill one of those baby wargs over this thing in season 1. And he makes a promise. Now, we have to admit, Elrond, Galadriel have problems making problems to finite entities with conscious and evolutionary drives, but Tolkien has no problem making promises to trees. Homeboy, like if we just go look in the letters, Homeboy, he hated a neighbor who had a tree cut down because it blocked the sun in a room, and he said, and he has like a long diatribe of just complaints about her, and he said like, nonetheless, she has a number of remarkable virtues. So, like just knowing his love for trees, you're sitting here. So Theo is like, oh, junk, I'm free. They let me out. The ends aren't like crazy. And Arondir's like, I'm going to promise we're going to like rebuild this. I want forgiveness. And then Winterbloom's like, forgiveness takes an age. And he's like, well, we live a long time. Why are we going to talk to these finite peeps? And then there's like a parting of the ways. Isildur and has that awkward moment where Estridge is like, oops, actually, I wasn't lying about being engaged, and here he is. And then Arondir and Theo are like butting it out. They're like giving their daps, piecing out because they set off on these different missions. Arondir's like, I got to go figure out what Adar and the orcs are up to, destroying junk and stuff. And Theo is apparently got a title. When I watched it the second time, it seemed weird. All I know is if we were going on Ring Wraith watch, Theo, whatever the gambling markets have it at, it is just taking a dive. You should have purchased Theo Becomes a Ring Wraith earlier, because they just made him a lord of what and what. And all I know is that we are looking for 9, and somebody just got leveled up. And so, yeah, that's what happens with them. Sorry, I got distracted again. But
if I wasn't a Methodist, I'd be well on my way to a solid gamble calling Theo as one of the ring wraiths last season, like the first 4 minutes after we met him. I remember texting Nick, and I was like, this one's a problem.
I know, but then you started to think, oh, I thought at first walking, oh, he's going to embrace his mom's role as a healer, and that's his commitment to the community. No. Arondir's like, no, you got a title. And I was like, homeboy's not had a pimple. Can you give a man a title? It ain't hereditary. Like, there's no, like, passing it down.
And who's Arondir to give the title,
Maybe all the people are sitting around, and the only thing they know is, like, kings get killed first. Who wants to do this? Anyone? We got a job description.
Who are we ready to sacrifice first? That kid, that one over there.
Who's going to talk to Adar when he comes? And maybe Adar doesn't even come personally. Maybe it's just Waldrick. And they were like,
we saw that guy break into to Waldrick's barn. Yeah, that kid deserves to be the leader.
The first episode of Waldrick Assassin will be Waldrick taking out Theo.
You stole my blade.
I would like you just to know that Alicia texted me and she's like, oh my God, Tolkien screaming late at night. I guess you're technically calling this work, but I can hear you up here with all the doors in the house shut and a sound machine on. And I said, sorry, I'll be quieter. And she goes, at least Waldrick wasn't in this episode.
Let's go.
That's true love. It's true love right there.
Oh my God.
So
yeah,
go
ahead. Go.
So I loved that we saw Ents. We saw Ent wives, and I loved even more that we heard them before we saw them. Like that is just that's just so right. In the forest, you hear them before you see them. I did think it was really funny, though, that the prison that they were keeping Theo and those other ones in looked like a poorly coppiced crepe myrtle. And if you've lived in the southeastern United States, you've seen how people absolutely just destroy their crepe myrtles by making like one big giant trunk, and then all these little singular limbs that come up, and all it looked like was that the Ents and the Ent wives had made this little prison out of a coppiced crepe myrtle. And I couldn't stop thinking about poorly horticultured forestry used for prisons.
Yeah, my neighbor has that going on with his across the street as we speak. Oh yeah.
Oof. Oof.
Oh, crepe myrtles.
It's a shame.
Okay, so Nick, question about this that I was actually interested in. Throughout the last season, Arondir is your favorite of the, completely new characters.
Yeah.
And actually the new characters I think are great.
Yeah.
Because the expectations aren't there. So then you're just asking, well, is this Tolkien adjacent or not? You're not like, is this pure or not? Because the pure question is kind of weird given the different medium and the limits of the showrunners.
Right.
But I'm interested how you're feeling about Arondir, because you got the switch up because the actress who was his love interest last year is like, I got to focus on my activism. So then they're going to make the orc arrow deadly, which may not have been in their original plan because they wrote the first two seasons, first drafts together. And so you have this shift in this where his relationship with Theo changes because of that, his relationship with the humans there, and then here you see this shift of his relationship with the Ents that ultimately gets him, I assume, next episode on a different plot line. So seeing how one of their unique characters is now starting to migrate between storylines with an actor shakeup and everything in it. I'm just interested how you're feeling about an elf we're getting to know who we didn't already know.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like you said, just been feeling that. I was thinking that just as I was listening. I watched it again and just listened to other people and what they said, and just kind of originally, it was almost like this exploration of the Athrobeth, which for people who don't know is a little story / essay. Almost, I don't know the right word for it. But anyway, Tolkien wrote it, and it's in Morgoth's Ring. And it's a conversation between Finrod, an elf, and then a woman named Andrith, I think. And so Andrith is in love with an elf, and so they talk about like the nature of like, oh, what happens when elves die? What happens when men die? Like, what are the special cases? Like, there's only been 3 elven marriages throughout the entire history, and it's only because, Iluvatar made an exception. And so I think they were trying to explore that, but now it's gone. And like you said, I think Arondir still, like I said, his awkward joke with the mudworm, kind of a weird place. I think it's kind of indicative of some of the like, what are we going to do with this guy? And I'm just patiently waiting to see where he's going, because now, like you said, even his relationship with Theo is going away too, with the keeping of words, right? That's kind of how they leave, right? He's like, I've got my, Theo's like, I got my own promises to keep or whatever. And like I said, I don't know. I'm patient. I like the in-between stories. I like transitional episodes of TV shows, just because we really have an opportunity to see the trajectory of where characters are going and see how they change. But like I said, will it be for the better? I hope so.
All right. Do y'all have anything to say before we talk about some proto-hobbits in the Tom Bombadil? You have to speak now or forever hold your peace, because I'm guessing things are about to get intense.
I mean, I'm ready.
Okay. Knowing how much we were all excited for Tom Bombadil, was why I was like, I should just make an outline of the other stuff that happens. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about Tom Bombadil. All right.
I just want people to know before we get into it, that Trip did so much research, and he sent 2 emails with like almost everything Tolkien had written outside of the Legendarium about Tom, and went into his origins. And I just want to. It was fantastic. So that's how pumped we are.
Oh, it is hard. Okay, I'm just gonna give my rendition of this storyline. But I'm gonna try to be a little more brief. I just want to say that everything when I think of what I wanted in a Tom Bombadil, this was better than what I imagined. Like, he's got that jolly vibe, but it's not like where it seems out of universe, because he's like humming it and singing it. He's got his weird aloofness. It's everything about Tom because he's on someone else's timeline and his own, and he's got that like look on his face the whole time. He's like, he basically 3/4 of what he says is straight out of the books, but uses it in different ways. But I'm just saying, if I was in charge, Tom Bombadil wouldn't have fit in this TV show, because I would have just wanted the Tom in my head. And they made something that made me think. They read Tom and all the weird crap I went through sending Nick and Tom shit on the internet. And it makes sense in this show. It makes sense with Tom Bombadil. And so I just think, and I'm sure plenty of people have this experience more often than I do, but I regularly read, watch, or do things and think, given the right context, budget, or situation, I could have done better. And then I watch this and was just like, I wouldn't have done this good. And then Brett McCreary was just like, you're going to give me a good Tom Bombadil? Watch this. It's kind of like one of those acoustic Led Zeppelin songs where after the second chorus, you hear some like feedback in the back, and you're like, whoa, I thought Jimmy Page was using an acoustic guitar. Is that a Gibson Les Paul feedback through a Marshall stack? And he's like, yes, I'm about to rock the pentatonic scale like I own that junk. That's what just happened. And if you don't appreciate that, like, it's okay. Not everyone gets to enjoy life as much as they could, but you could. I'm just telling you. That's what Bram McCreary did. He was like, you're like, oh, look at this. It's like the Battle of Nevermore. You're like, this is a good song. But then all of a sudden, in the middle of a Led Zeppelin song, when they were just like, screw it, let Jimmy Page shred for 45 seconds. That's what Bram McCreary's level up just happened. You're just like, oh, look, there's a Robert Plant. Oh, he's got 2 octaves. This is great. And like John Bonham. Oh, junk. Oh, you're sitting there like, what a rhythm section. And then somebody named Jimmy's foot switches over and hits overdrive and grabs his Les Paul. It's like, and you're like, ah! I didn't know. Oh, I'm about to get in trouble. That's what just happened.
I mean, it's very apt, just because half of Led Zeppelin's catalog references Tolkien anyway. So I mean, Led Zeppelin, the Ina Lindeley.
That's why I was thinking of it. But
yeah,
okay,
hell yeah.
All right. So, what happens is a stranger follows a goat, which I know. From Twitter, too many people thought this was trying to insert a Christ figure in a Tolkien-related property, and I just want you to know he's Catholic, so it's not. So he's not like C.S. Lewis. That's like, if we could stick a Christ figure next to Father Christmas in the first 100 pages, we win. That's just not who he is. But nonetheless, the stranger follows a goat. He ends up at Tom Bombadil's house, which in the middle of the ruined desert, all of a sudden has all this plant life. He's got a nice garden. He's rocking some fruit. And the stranger is like, whoa, 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 look at this cool tree. And he's like, been looking for a tree. He's been having visions of the tree. And the stranger is like, wow, that looks like Gandalf's staff from the movies that I haven't seen yet because I'm on a different timeline. But nonetheless, I just want to seize the wood. And the stranger's like, I want to grab that big piece of wood right off this tree and see if it levels up my power. Will it help me emit magic if I grab this big piece of wood with its... I mean, it's all like veiny and knotted up in that piece, and he just wants to seize it. And the tree's just like, you can't seize my wood without asking. Like, you're in timeout. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You didn't even ask. You didn't even ask. Where's my enthusiastic consent? Istar. And like that's how stuff gets all. He gets put in timeout. He gets put in tree timeout. And Tom Bombadilio is like, somebody wants to play hide and seek. And so he's like, whoa, hey tree. And I'm going to say stuff I'm going to say later to a tree that's a little bit more turdish. Because this tree, he swallowed an Istar because they were trying to steal his wood without asking. Because this is a new age. It's a new age. It's probably part of the PR agenda. Like this is politically correct agenda of Rings of Power. Is it wants enthusiastic consent, even from Istar grabbing wood off a tree. And I'm like,
woke nonsense.
Nonsense. They're just like, you could just imagine JD Vance. He's like, you should be able to jerk wood anywhere you want. If you want to jerk some wood for your own possession, to channel your power through the other wood that you just stole off a living creature, I don't care, because I don't count living creatures. And I'm just like, JD, you converted to Catholicism. You should talk to J.R.R. Tolkien. He would tell you that you just can't like go like jerking wood off trees like you own it. That's not how it works. They were here before you. You should talk to the eldest. Speaking of the eldest, that's Tom Bombadil. And Tom Bombadil hollers at Tom and is just like, whoa, come on, let's work this out. And then what happens there? Vroom, 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 over to Nori and Poppy, because they were separated. Because of, he had already tried to work a piece of wood, but that piece of wood had evaporated into a giant dust storm. So Nori and Poppy running around, they run into this little elf that looks like Rufio from Hook. And Rufio is just like, what's your name? They're like, what's your name? He's like, nobody. And then they're like, no, it's not. And he's like, oh, it is. And you're like, oh, Rufio. And so he's trying to explain some rules to talk to the head of their little tribe of not Harfoots. What were they called? Stores. I should have wrote that down. All right. And then they show up there, didn't tell them all the rules. Trouble gets caused. Things get awkward. And then cuts to the Dark Wizard talking to Iron Face. And the Dark Wizard, who I just realized played Caesar in Rome, which is just like really weirding me out. It's just like, I'll handle this, Star. You go get the Harfoots. And I'm just like, all right, this is awkward. Why are you going to send so much violent hardware into a place with a whole bunch of 4-foot people? And I was like, what is this? An American public school in the first week? Must be a red state. So then we cut back to the house of Tom Bombadil, because Tom's like pulling the stranger out, and he's like, you obviously need a bath. I'm going to get you some food. Very, very like Fellowship of the Rings vibe. And the stranger gets a little creep because it sounds like Goldberry is singing with Tom, but then Goldberry's never there. But then he talks to Tom, and Tom sounds exactly like Tom Bombadil, but it's new lyrics. But it is exactly what Tom Bombadil would say if he has no interest in answering your question, takes it literally in a childish way, and looks at you like you're the dumb one. He's just like, clearly you have a lot of anxiety and fear running through you, and I'm freaking the eldest. So what do you mean? Is there someone in the other room? I'm in the other room, blah, 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 blah. and you're like want to stab your face on behalf of the stranger, except that you're like freaking Tom Bombadil is on the screen and he's being Tom Bombadilio, and they did not borrow those lines, they wrote them. And if J.R.R. Tolkien was trying to play Tom Bombadil at the Theology Beer Camp cosplay, and then we handed him a microphone with a quality costume, and he said those lines to make a joke at the person that asked him, he would win. Tom, not Tom Bombadil, would be like, I don't even need to talk to these other people. That just wins. That's Tom Bombadil. That's what just happened. And so people should just like build a bridge, walk over it. And if you don't like it, you can blow it up just like Sauron did over the Brandywine, because you should go home. You should go home. That's what you should do. So then the stranger's like, Tom, who are you? He basically says all this stuff from Lord of the Rings. He says it, but it's in a different context and in a different age. So then you're like, well, what does this mean? That's awkward. How did they change it? You're like, no, well, he was always the eldest because he saw the first acorn and the stars show up. So you can't be like, oh, the context is changing. No, because he was before that. So just get over it. Again, Brandywine Bridge, build the bridge, get over it, or just jump off. And so Tom tells the stranger that, you right now you're wanting to borrow. You just want that branch. You didn't ask for permission, and you have to be worthy. You have to be worthy of getting that stick. And currently, you have the power of a stick, but you don't know how to work this. This is a conversation, all of us that were. I'm going to pass on a joke. I'm self-editing right now, but it was a good one. It was a good one. I was looking at two friends' faces, and I thought, this will get them to laugh. But then I'll have to edit. So he's like, but you can become worthy. And next time you should ask enthusiastic consent and responsibility, and it should cohere with your ability with an understood vocation. So then, raiders are approaching. And Tom's just like, oh, that's interesting. They're coming. And he hints at, oh, well, the dark wizard we know, he must have come there and ate some honey with him otherwise. And that gets you thinking. It gets you thinking, and you're like, well, how's this going to work? Well, then cut back over. Those creeps show back up over, is it Gundabal? Gundabal, the head of the other proto-hobbits.
Yeah.
And she's like, we're going to cash you out at sunrise. But then those big baddies show up, and they're like, no. Why? They name drop Sadek Burrows. And you were like, whoa, are they going to drop the sack in this episode? Yes. And it's going to make them think of the Burrows. They get this little story. The song shows back up. All that junk. I'm just like, it's making me feel better about the things I didn't like about the Harfoot storyline in the first part. I already like Sadek, not just because he has sweet sideburns, but because he's awesome. And then the store storyline has this connection with the Harfoot storyline, and the connection is the possibility of moving to a place where you could build a hole in the ground. And I'm just thinking, I wonder if there's anyone here that loves hanging out in nice, luscious green places, maybe near the Windy Wheel, where that could help them get to a place where you could build holes in the ground. And I wonder if there's anybody in this story, perhaps even in this episode, who could be friends with said person, possibly Tom Bombadil, that could help him get back to the Windy Wheel, which he mentions in the first scene. And then perhaps at the end of the Third Age, after the destruction of the ring, when this whole thing is over, shows back up to go hang out with him, even though he was walking with some hobbits that just dropped a ring in Mordor. He's like, no, I got to go talk to my homeboy Tom. It's been a while since we talked. Wonder what could initiate. I don't know. Wonder what could initiate Gandalf or the stranger. Or it would be strange if a wizard had known he wanted to go hang out with Tom Bombadil instead of going with the hobbits back into the Shire, because one of them is like a rolling stone and the other one is like moss. They have different agendas, but they were connected at some point. Wouldn't it be interesting to know why Gandalf parted ways and edit in the revisions of Lord of the Rings that Gandalf needed to go add to the Tom. That wasn't in the original version. In the final version, Frodo refuses to touch a sword, and Gandalf pieces out before they go back to the Shire. So the scouring of the Shire is just hobbits. And he goes to hang out with Tom. I wonder what would justify that. It would be like, I don't know, perhaps in the Second Age. The hobbits all ended up there, and it was connected to Tom and Gandalf. And it's the same time Tom somehow imparted to Gandalf a mission that he both understood and was beyond. And I just say to myself, what is the chance that that's likely to be the case? And all I know is when I got done with this episode and then spent way too much time finding every reference to Tom Bombadil, I got done and thought, these scenes are great. All I know is that if you're just working off what the showrunners can use and you know their friendliness to all the lore, Homeboys were just basically like, how can we make this junk cool and cohere? And they did it. And so I love Tom Bombadil. That's real Tom Bombadil. I'm not sold on that being a real Gandalf yet. But this is really Tom Bombadil. And yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah. Everything you said just sounds so awesome. And I just to add on to how awesome this episode is, and people are like, why does Tom have multiple houses? He lived in the Withywindle, and like he had like larger land, and then it got smaller because of Sauron and stuff, and the Second Age and everything. But he's a wanderer. Like, we don't know, right? He's a mystery. He's an enigma. But again, in the Red Book of Westmarch with, Adventures of Tom Bombadil, written by hobbits. The Bucklanders are a group of hobbits. If you don't know the Bucklanders, they descend. So there's three types of hobbits. There's Harfoots, there's Stores, and there's Fallowhides. Okay, and at some point they all kind of mix together, and they're just kind of like generic hobbits. But they were a little more separated, as we see with the Harfoots and now the Stores. Also, I love the connection to Rufio and the Lost Boys. I had not made that connection, and I loved it. But the Bucklanders are claimed to have given Tom Bombadil his name, Tom Bombadil. Okay, so if they spent a lot of time with him, and Tom Bombadil's house in Rune looks really similar to the way that the Stores have their houses set up. Not only is Tom Bombadil, being this kind of mentor character, or at least being there as a the closest thing to a Maiar as anything can get, at least that the stranger has encountered. He's there, but then also as a guide to the Stores as well, as they eventually will migrate to the what's the word? It's Stuzat, which for those of you who don't know is the Westron word for the Shire. And for those of you who don't know, Westron is the proper name for the common tongue in Lord of the Rings. It's not English.
What shows up in English is called Westeron.
Yeah, that's right.
But wouldn't the direct because it includes the article, so wouldn't the direct translation be the Shire?
Yeah. I've seen so many people, they're like the Stuzat, and it should just be Stuzat or the Stuza.
Can I just tell you, as someone with a sense of humor, if I was in charge of that show, making that decision, you can't make that decision not on purpose, that you do it just because some turd is going to waste minutes of their life tweeting, well, you should have said this because that just means the Shire. I feel that way quite. It's kind of like if I'm talking
Los
to
Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, if I'm talking to a scholar, I base whether I say Augustine or Augustine as opposite of whatever I think they're going to do, just because it makes it awkward for them, because they're looking at you and they're like, well, you do have a PhD. I guess you do teach this or whatever. But I'm just like Augustine said, and they're like, well, Augustine, blah, 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 blah. And I just keep saying Augustine the whole time and never acknowledge it. And I mean, I've done it hundreds of times. I think one time someone said, why do you keep saying that? And I was just like, I went to St. Augustine on my honeymoon. This is great. It makes me happy.
They're like, this guy
Yeah.
has a PhD? What? What?
I mean, the city is obviously named after the saint, and it's the first bar in North America. So, but the bar is St. George's. So anyway, all right, Tom, you saw your namesake, which I kind of wonder if Tom Bombadil is who your father was thinking of when he gave you a name.
As much as I wish that was the case, my grandfather's also named Thomas. So
Yeah, but if Tom Bombadil is the eldest,
then he's older than my grandfather. That's true.
is there a Tom that's not named after Tom Bombadil?
Even Thomas the Apostle, named after Tom Bombadil.
Dang.
Yes. Don't you think that explains things?
Yes.
Yeah. Like Tom Bombadil is the kind of enigma where you're like, Thomas, is that the beloved disciple or not? Because when they asked the beloved disciple, they asked the beloved disciple, well, who are you? And then he just started singing and they got confused. They were like, are we just supposed to put a song in the middle of the Gospel of John like this? Like, how do we handle this? And he had all these rhymes in Aramaic. What are they going to sound like in Greek? Tom Bombadilio. And they were like, well, let's just call you Tom. But
He's
what
like
go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, he's like the Dublineers of Middle Earth, you know?
Yeah. But Tom, so tell us how meeting him on screen compared to the kind of like long time relationship with him, like what stuck out?
I've listened to the soundtrack, for weeks, and I didn't fully know how. I figured that Old Tom Bombadil was going to be the music that played under the credits, right? Like that made sense. At least the Rufus Wainwright singing it.
It was in his contract.
Yeah, that's 100% credits music, which is what they did. So I really wanted to see how the singing and the song and the music was going to get acted, and I was really hoping that Rory Kinnear did not play him like the Ghost of Christmas Present in The Muppets Christmas Carol.
Oh, well said.
Like I was really, that would have been a completely, like, that's the wrong kind of Mary. It's the wrong kind of mirth, I think. One of the things I've not really read a ton of people's reactions or responses to this episode, partly because I just wanted to talk with y'all and I don't really care what they think. And one of the only things I did read, though, somebody was talking about how one of the things that bothered them was that he wasn't like joyful enough, and I think what they were thinking was this like just utterly unaware of the world, kind of completely in the present, to the point that there is no past, there is no future, and we only live to make merry now. And to be eldest and to be merry, you have to be able to find a deeper relationship that gives a deeper sense of contentment and joy, than come in, make merry, and know ye better, man. Right? Like, and so I was really, when the moment that the stranger started following the goat, I sat up and I was like, oh, here we go. This is it. This has got to be the moment. Like if this is not the moment, then I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And when he came around, before he even turned around, like his body was right. Like
Oh yeah.
the way he held his body, and then when he does turn, and he doesn't have the hat on, he doesn't have the blue jacket. It's just in that tunic, and the bees are behind him. Like there was a concerned, compassionate curiosity, like that just washed over the entire scene. And I texted, I think I texted Nick. I was like, the way my heart soared in that moment, it's really hard to put into words. Like that, and then throughout the entire exchange, through the bathing and the singing, whatever was playing around in that pot on the shelf next to the tub.
Yeah.
When he came back in, and he and the stranger asked if there was anyone else there, and he was like, well, you are, I think. Like I like all of it was just, it was like my heart was, it was so light and held and wonderful. And one of the things that like really caught me, and I'll let Nick ramble. One of the things that really caught me was when he's talking to old Ironwood.
Yeah.
Where did they film this? This is not in New Zealand, but that was a gorgeous olive tree.
I think this season was in the UK, except for they filmed lots of external stuff in season 1.
Okay, because this
But
entire
it still didn't look like the UK.
This entire setting is gorgeous. And that the old Ironwood, when the stranger's gotten sucked in, and old Ironwood's holding him there, and Tom goes to the tree and asks him why he's working, and he said, "You drink deep, or drink water, run deep, drink water, rest." Like the way he said it, and the attentiveness to that creature's need in that moment of stress was like that. Everything was just right for me, but that particular interaction just really like sewed up this ecological wonder that is Tom Bombadil.
Oh yeah.
God, everything that you said, Tom, just like, I feel like I'm glad that we got to see your like reaction, just because I think all three of us felt that way. And when I heard people disappointed, which I get, you see something, you have expectations, it doesn't meet. But like you said, this Tom Bombadil, like you said, which is kind of portrayed in the book as this sort of ghost of Christmas Present, right? He is kind of this cartoon character, which is awesome in the book and everything, but these are like myths and stories, and I felt there was like this humanness that was brought to it, like this more personable character that has like takes inspiration from, like, I felt like there was a little bit of Hagrid from Harry Potter, I won't lie, but in a really good way. I thought there was like this fatherliness that came in, and of course he's fatherless because he's the eldest. Yeah, I loved everything about it. It even gave me some Beorn vibes from The Hobbit with the bees. And I think there's a connection to wilderness there. Yeah, and also this this season was filmed in, I don't know how to pronounce it, Tide National Park in Spain. So it's filmed in Spain for real.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. The bees were like such a great touch. There's a lot of like thinking with like an eco-theological eye, and thinking about like in church history, beekeeping is one of the old practices of monasteries and convents and the people who take religious vows. And one of the things that just came across with because with beekeeping and honey harvest, all the human really can do is protect the bees, because the bees do the work.
Oh, come on.
I
feel a Tolkien sermon coming.
And there's this commitment to letting them be them.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
And that was such a like foreshadowing of the rest of the stranger's time in the abode of Tom Bombadil. Like the first cultivation we see is not the cultivation that the men get from the Entwives, right? It's a cultivation that like fully lets the other creature be the other creature, and you just benefit from being in right relationship with them.
And it's little baby lambs, right? Ones that are dependent upon caretaking. No one that's matured to autonomy, like to being autonomous, is there.
Yeah.
Right. So the stranger is this Istar, but hasn't got to autonomous. And then he's basically saying to him, are you going to go the Dark Wizard route? Or are you going to go this other way? Because somebody has to stop the Dark Wizard Sauron connection, because Junk could get fierce.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I've spent about 3 hours reading everything related to Tom Bombadil, so that I could come up with. So I have no idea how we should structure this. But there's one specific letter that is the one that's most important to me. But I thought I would just mention the things I sent to y'all, and then if you think I should have said more, you can. But I'm gonna do a delivery rant, and then y'all both need to say whatever you want to say, because in all likelihood you'll say some cool stuff. Then I'll weave it into whatever thing I want to say, and then you can tell me I'm wrong. But like, I've had quite a bit of bourbon, and I've spent a lot of time on this, mostly at nights when I'm trying to go to bed in the past week. And I have a very strong take that I thought if I put on the internet, there'll be people that know better that tell me I'm wrong. So my goal is, after all of y'all, everyone said stuff, my really strong take of Tom Bombadil is the proper Catholic appreciation for the Anabaptist tradition. Hot take. And that the Rings of Power understood that and has presented it as such. That's where I'm going to end. And now most people that listen to this have no idea what that means, but both of you do. So that's not just because you got my emails, but because y'all are theology nerds. So I'm going to attempt. Now, Nick, can you just set a clock for me? Yeah. I'm going to try to spend 2 minutes on the 3 sections I sent y'all. I originally had cut and pasted all the quotes of Tom Bombadil and action points of what happens in Lord of the Rings, and then realized it was too long. So then I summarized it to myself with bullet points, and then I just sent y'all the bullet points. And then there's where the origin of the character came from, and then I found all the letters that it came out of, and all that kind of stuff that I sent you. So now I've got a different order for my presentation now than what I sent you, because I rethought it this morning when I was taking a dump. But I don't have to tell anyone. All right. So Tom Bombadil, the origin of Tom Bombadil, is that Tolkien, who we know, especially if you're in one of those really cool families that dramatically reads all the letters of Father Christmas to their children during Advent, is a character, and it was based on a Dutch doll that belonged to Michael, one of his kids. And the doll looked splendid with a feather in his hat. And so, you know what Tolkien did? He's just like, let me tell stories. I just want to tell cool stories to my kids, so I'm going to invent this guy. All that junk later becomes the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, like the text, which he doesn't publish until he gets a letter much later. Who's like, could you tell us more about Tom Bombadil? And he's like, by the way, I thought about making him the main character in the sequel to The Hobbit, but that got sidetracked by the freaking Lord of the Rings. But nonetheless, I was about to wake everyone in my house up. But I think I could publish all this hot material I have if the artist from all the Chronicles of Narnia stuff makes my drawings, and that happens. That's the book Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Now, in it, you get interaction with Tom Goldberry, the River Woman's daughter, his partner in the text. Old Man Willow's in it, all this kind of stuff, but it's not there. The continuity threads are thin from the
Right.
Tom Bombadil that we think of, but there are all these words, characters, references. And even in it, there's references to graves, Barrow-wights, all this kind of stuff, and a kind of nod to Tom being the spirit of the dying Oxbridge vibe, like Oxford, Cambridge. Oxbridge is the term schools like the University of Edinburgh, where I was faculty for a bit, who are ranked higher than them in certain areas, call people who perform a certain attitude. I don't know if all the UK, Scottish prejudice towards English is great. They love Americans because they're like, y'all won when you rebelled and we didn't. And we need to vote for this. So
And we didn't
who knows?
the first time,
You know,
or the second, or the third, but we will the fourth.
well, there's a promissory note. But all I know is Oxbridge in Scotland is used as a term of derision towards people on a certain high horse, all of which, nonetheless, okay, not going to make an aside. This will be Nick will cut me off. All right, so in Lord of the Rings, Tom says, he's like, you hear in the show the big quotes about him answering who he is, but in the book, he gets information from many sources, including Farmer Maggot and the elves. We learn in the book he's got connections. So whatever bumbling idiot someone may think he's supposed to be, if you just pay attention to details, he's got connects. Also, Farmer Maggot is basically the Hobbit equivalent of the Godfather. Second, he seems to have like all this power up in this piece. He just like walks up to Old Man Willow and the Barrow-wights and it's just like, come on, let's just chill out. Let's just calm down, but in like a jovial way. And all that goes on. And do the Nazgul while the hobbits are hanging out at his house get anywhere near that piece? No basket. And it could be that Theo told them, like, I've had an encounter with Tom before, or whatever, or maybe Waldrig was just like, don't mess with Tom. You got to wait till the ring's away from Tom. And we've encountered him before. He didn't care. They can't stay there forever. He'll just at day 90 of those songs, Advil, and we hadn't been invented yet. That's fourth age material. So then he's like, oh yeah, I'm the eldest. I remember the first raindrop, the first acorn, all that material we get there. He's clearly there before Sauron ever shows up. So, and Melkor, right? So the original big baddie Melkor, Sauron, his lieutenant, which we see in the prologue of this, doesn't work out when he first takes the crown, sans
Consent of the governed.
yeah. When the crown shows up, he catches it upside down and dies. And also we learn in Lord of the Rings, the ring has no hold over him. He puts it on. He sees Frodo with it on. He's just like, has no idea that the ring of power is in bold, underline, and with a wake of death behind it. Right? Like, he's just like, what is this? This is interesting. And he parts with the ring quicker than Bilbo. And the greatest miracle of the whole Lord of the Rings is Bilbo is parting with the ring. So that's who he is. Elrond and Gandalf, when at the Council of Elrond. So this is after the encounter with the ring wraiths. Frodo stabbed. They show up and are like, oh, Elrond heals him over time, and Frodo wakes up. He's like, where's Sam? Oh, he's been here by your side. That whole bit. After they're like making plans, Elrond and Gandalf are like, you can't give Tom the ring. It's not because it'll claim him. It's because he ain't claiming Jack. Tom is like your pothead friend, where if the responsibility is immediate and can be done right then, like he's like down, like if you just tell Tom like, could you help me move next month? Tom's going to be like, sure, but you don't think he's coming. But if you see him that morning at coffee and you're like, Tom, you know my family's moving and we got to pack everything up and move a giant amount. Like, could you help us? Tom's going to be like, sure. And he'll be at your house 3 days, helping you pack everything. He's like, you want help with the road trip all the way across the country? Sure. He's like down. But Gandalf and Elrond are like, you can't. No. What are you talking about giving him just because a ring doesn't have power over him? And then at the very end of Lord of the Rings, Gandalf goes to see Tom. Here's Gandalf's line when he tells the Hobbit, so he's piecing out before they get back to the scouring of the Shire. The line in the book goes, but if you would know, I am turning aside now. I'm going to have a long talk with Bombadil. Such a talk as I've not had in all my time. He is a moss gatherer, and I've been a stone doomed to rolling. But my rolling days are ending, and now we have much to say to one another. Right. So, like, even there's this whole level of familiarity. And that, along with random details that may or may not cohere, is all that happens in the actual text. But the letters. All right, here's what goes down. In the letters of Tolkien. Letter 19. Tolkien says, do you think Tom Bombadil, the spirit of the vanishing Oxford, Berkshire countryside, could be made into the hero of a story? Or is he, as I suspect, fully enshrined in the enclosed verses? Okay, he's sitting there going, Tom Bombadil is like my banner flag. Not like Celebrimbor is Sauron's banner flag, but a different banner flag. He's like, can I squeeze some more of this in? Because, right, like he represents something important. When later he says Tom's an allegory or exemplar, a particular embodying of pure, real, natural science, the spirit that desires knowledge of other things, their history and nature, because they are other and wholly unconcerned with the doing, annulling, with the knowledge, zoology, botany, cattle breeding, agriculture. There, he's talking about Tom's relationship to nature is an allegory for how science should function, right, as non-controlling interventions, arrivals that only seek to understand, not impose their theory of knowledge. Like, as Tolkien problematizes most of modern epistemology in its relationship to technology, war, violence, structuring of human peoples, top-down power, all these kinds of things. You just hear him here going like, also, Tom loves nature more than scientists do, and they spend their whole day staring at it because this is how science is supposed to do. It's supposed to vibe out before it details out. And if you did that, you wouldn't cut shit apart and say you understand it. Which, again, in the book, Gandalf and Sauron have a discussion where Gandalf and Sauron have a battle of like, oh, how do you understand something? Gandalf's like, or Saruman, yeah, where you can't like just like take things apart and dissect it and think you understood it, because like the power, top-down power, likes to make things into parts to understand. The Eru Iluvatar takes parts and puts them into whole, into song, or puts people and races into fellowship. Okay, I mean, it's like the whole freaking story of Lord of the Rings is the power of cooperative bottom up power ultimately defeats the partitioning of top down power. And so if you get that, Tom Bombadil is like what's good about the academy he likes, what's good about nature. And then um when he's talking, so a number of people are like, is Tom Eru Iluvatar? And he's like, no basket. Okay, I won't go through all the quotes here. But here's like the greatest passage. And this is why Tom Bombadil is a Catholic explaining why every church needs an Anabaptist tradition. This is, or better put, why the Catholic Church needs what's the French anarchist critique? Jacques Ellul. This is why Tom Bombadil is Jacques Ellul. This is Tolkien, letter 156 to the editor of Lord of the Rings. You should just all go read the whole thing. Tom Bombadil, but this is a question about Tom Bombadil. I didn't read whatever occasioned this. Tom Bombadil is not an important person to the narrative. I suppose he has some importance as a comment, in scare quotes. I mean, I do not really write like that. He's just an intervention who first appeared in the Oxford magazine in 1933, like in reference to that origin story, one of those kids' stories that then turned into some poems. And he represents something that I feel important, though I would not be prepared to analyze the feeling precisely. Now, let's just go ahead and say, feel like he wants to analyze precisely. This is Tolkien, who invented entire languages for one character. So, what is the mysterious enigma he doesn't want to analyze precisely? I guess there's something up with that. I would not, however, have left him in if he did not have some kind of function. I might put it this way. The story, Lord of the Rings, is cast in terms of a good side and a bad side. Beauty against ruthless ugliness. Tyranny against kingship. Moderated freedom with consent against compulsion that has long lost any object save mere power and so on. But both sides in some degree, conserve or destructive, want a measure of control. But if you have, as it were, a vow of poverty, renounce control, and take delight in things for themselves without reference to yourself, watching, observing, and to some extent knowing, then the question of the rights and wrongs of power and control might become utterly meaningless to you, and the means of power quite valueless. I would just like to pause for all the process relational thinkers. I believe what he's saying is that when love becomes uncontrolling, God is a bit oblivious as to morals. It is a natural pacifist view, which always arises in the mind when there is a war. But the view of Rivendell, and here he means the High Council, seems to be that it is an excellent thing to have represented. Like they kept Bombadil around for a purpose, meaning he was not preserved on accident, but on purpose. But that there are, in fact, things with which it cannot cope. Rivendell, the perspective of good versus bad. Let's create a binary and win. Can't cope. And upon which its existence nevertheless depends. So the beauty of Tom putting on a ring, seeing him with its on, being indifferent to the whole binary that generates it, that's actually required for the whole beauty of him. And vice versa. The beauty, essentially, here of the gospel requires the vocation of the non-religious. Like if you think Catholic, like he uses vow language to reference the vows of poverty, things that the priests take. We actually do the Sermon on the Mount literally. Though that is only made possible by people that deal with reality and all the human crap that Rivendell's trying to negotiate and all its seriousness and figure this out. But that whole reality you're trying to figure out in reality makes no sense if it doesn't also make possible someone that lets you know the story you're telling is ultimately it came into being and will go out of being and is ultimately meaningless and the future is beyond it. Right? Like Tom Bombadil is the eschatological presence of swords being turned into plowshares and how uninterested the world's future that is in God is in making ultimate what is penultimate, namely even the ring. And Gandalf is a mover and a shaker. He's a rolling stone. And Bombadil, who's like, you have a vocation, and yours is these two, a bad wizard and Sauron. But he's actually beyond it. And his presence makes possible the dynamic of the battle of good and evil. Because the battle of good and evil that's played out in history is ultimately relativized with the very structure of meaning that justifies the resistance to evil to begin with, namely the joy of Tom Bombadil, the enjoyment of song, hanging out with his bees, holding a lamb, talking to trees, all that stuff is the justification that the whole other thing's worth it. So what does the steward of the story, Gandalf, do as the hobbits are going back into the Shire? Goes to see Bombadil. What is the change of the hobbits going back into Bombadil? As Gandalf goes back to see Bombadil, what's the change in the hobbits in the edits of Lord of the Rings that makes you go, how does this story move forward? Frodo agrees with Bombadil. He doesn't pick up a sword. He doesn't kill Jack. Like, you see this change. Gandalf and goes to meet Tom. You get this explanation to the editor of like the Anabaptist tradition makes possible the other. The other is justified by the potential of the Anabaptist tradition. And then Gandalf pieces out and says, y'all got to go back. Merry, Pippin, and Sam are just like, look, two of us drank int juice. The other freaking went to Mordor. We're strapping blades of Westerness. Like, step back, Sharky. Right? But what is Frodo doing? Frodo shows up. He goes, no hobbit has killed another hobbit on purpose in the Shire. We're not doing that. I don't care. Yes, some of them got coerced into this, and this is how they are surviving, but some of them did it on purpose, and we're not killing one of them. That's what Frodo does. Only time you get descriptions of Frodo's hand is when he doesn't put it on Sting. So if you just take the edit seriously, and then you take the Gandalf Tom thing seriously, and you take his letter to the editor, Tom Bombadil represents essentially the proleptic arrival of new creation as a Catholic, restored creation, where you get the grace of being blind to the power of binaries and their interplay. And yet, right, that proleptic grace, the future, the horizon of when all things have been reconciled, is the energy or the battery, in a sense, in this story, in what we just saw, assuming this is Gandalf, which it should be at this point, like essentially the proleptic energy of Bombadil is now the battery that generates Gandalf's whole thing. And if you're telling me, if I was assigned with this and I read this passage and knew I wanted to have Tom Bombadil and I had like Rufus Wainwright singing the song Brad McCreary wrote and an actor was going to pull it off and all that junk, and I read this and I was like, I wonder how I'm going to do this, that you could come up with something better, you are high. You're high. You're really, really high. You couldn't have come up with something better. It literally coheres with the edits of Lord of the Rings that Tolkien does in the final version to send Frodo nonviolent to the scouring of the Shire, Gandalf to go see Tom. He contrasts Tom, Rolling Stone, moss grower, and yet he wants to go talk to him. Why? Well, the answer to it is Tom gives him his vocation. He teaches him that you can't just grab some wood, it has to be with consent, and that your vocation involves building a fellowship because power and domination is not the means to the end. And then how do you justify your ultimate you've succeeded in your vocation is when you know the four hobbits going back in don't need your presence to set things to right. Why? Because Frodo won't touch a sword, and he's confident. In Frodo touching a sword is edited out of the original version once Gandalf leaves. Gandalf leaves, Frodo never considers violence, makes a demand of not killing. I'm just telling you, this is I had never even thought about this till last week when I watched this and spent way too much time on this. But Tolkien has an ecumenical vision where there is, guess what? He's going to suggest an ecosystem of the church where Catholics, Protestants, and the Anabaptist or radical Protestant tradition actually create a place where healthy versions of all of them enable the overturning and progress of the flourishing of life. And so the elves, the Catholics, and the men, Protestants, and then all of a sudden what happens? The Anabaptist tradition, which was this primordial dream, erupts in history with Tom, with Frodo, and I mean, you get other characters that can do it. But I'm just sitting there going, all of a sudden there's this ecumenical reading, and I just think our showrunners who grew up Mormon are the ones that came up with the ecumenical reading, and it coheres. So I just think if people don't like Tom Bombadil in this, then again, they're probably fundamentalists. They don't even want ecumenical cooperation to figure out how to embody the peaceable kingdom in the present.
Well, and as we've talked about multiple times, everything you said is just another ecumenism and just biodiversity of thought and tradition that's just present in Middle Earth and reflective of the reality of the Christian tradition. And of course we've talked about Tolkien being process curious, and of course coming from the line of John Henry Newman, which people have argued is like the anticipatory theology, and philosophy that informs Whitehead. But because both of you have done PhDs in Whitehead and Whiteheadian and process stuff, and Tom in particular had brought up something in the chat. Give me some process takes on Tom Bombadil and all that.
One of the things that comes to mind, especially when you're reading that letter that Tolkien sends the editor, is the distinction that Charles Hartshorne makes about omnipotence, and that like complete power over others is actually total impotence, and that divine omnipotence is the ability to I don't have his exact words, but the ability to be affected by others and to affect others, because you recognize the freedom and power of creatures also in becoming. And there's so much of that in how Tolkien describes what power means for Bombadil, that there's a very clear fight going on between whether it's, as he calls it, the conservative or the destructive, but they're both seeking a particular controlling stake. And that through like a Hartsonian process read, there's a lot of good actor work that's going on in our world that is still seeking controlling stake. And that's different from a divine omnipotence that seeks to live in an empowering and a freeing love. That it's more than empowering. It's not empowering in a top-down paternalism. It's empowering in a recognizing of the other's worth, so that the other can name their own worth. Like think like liberation psychology and the priests, the martyrs of El Salvador, right? And the work they were doing in flipping, I mean, keep in the Catholic Church in the 20th century, in flipping the hierarchy here, that the direction of power can never be accurately called divine if it's always running top down. But it also can never be accurately called divine if it's only running bottom up, right? There has to be a genuine relationality that recognizes capacity and power and worth and self-determination, and recognizes the choice of love and the choice of creativity, the choice of transformative grace. And that's what, and this is, I've talked about this in my own work, that's what grace is that the radical Protestants get wrong. That's what grace is that the transubstantiate Catholics get wrong. And this is where I love the ecumenism here, because the dwarves are all the Eastern Orthodox. And grace in the Orthodox tradition,
and give it to me raw.
Grace in the Orthodox tradition that John Wesley picks up, right, and brings into Methodism, in that sense, it's non-substantial, right? Grace is not this present that God hands to you and says, hey, look, you're saved, congrats. Grace is the condition of creation such that you can now live into love. Instead of saying grace is, it's better to say it is gracious that. And it feels like Bombadil is especially in his conversation with the stranger, who I'm with you, like we're definitely Gandalf by this point. Especially in his conversation with the stranger, it is gracious that Bombadil is calling forth the consent to be in relationship with the tree before you just go rip its branch off. It is gracious that Bombadil points out that he's not the first Ishtar who has had honey by his fire, right? It is gracious that Bombadil washed, how did he phrase? I did as much as I could with this dirty robe.
Yeah.
Like there's this.
It's kind of like the other gives limitations.
Yeah.
To one's power because the other gets an integrity of its own.
Almost. And not just that is the case, but that there's a depth of goodness to that the world of Sauron cannot abide. Like, so you didn't read what I think is actually the most important sentence in that entire letter to the editor. Nothing would be left for Bombadil in the world of Sauron. And
that
I
would
think
have been another 10 minutes, Tom.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I think
really
it's because
not
the world of Sauron cannot abide that relationality that recognizes the integrity of the other. And Bombadil can only live in a world where that grace can be transformative and creative and binding.
Yeah.
Oh, junk.
Yeah.
Come on. Oh, that's a Horn of Gondor. Oh. Nick, can I ask you a question? Then you can say whatever you want.
Ask me.
Because that was like a walk the aisle process sermon right there. Okay. Thinking what he just said. And now, I know you and I were really hoping for Blue Wizards. Tom Bombadil was so good, I really hope that's Gandalf, even though it's wrong. This is how much I like that Tom Bombadil. Now, Gandalf is ultimately gonna get, is it Narya, the one of the three elvish rings, which is essentially connected to the power to inspire and empower others for, like, oh, we're going to resist domination, tyranny, despair in all these moments. And we can Like when you discover at the end of Lord of the Rings that Gandalf has one of these rings on, and then you know which one, you're like, oh, that explains some things. But to me, one of the things that I'm interested in is if we take the kind of the brackets of a TV show where you can't have like every episode new humans showing up. So it's got to be condensed. And it's based off only things that they can legally talk about unless they get permission. And then, the Elvish rings go first in this one. So you get the kind of character relations of Elrond and Galadriel we talked about earlier, which help make sense of what happens later, right? So the character dynamics are more important than the trivia dynamics.
Right.
Then knowing that at some point, right, he's not just coming into his staff because he has a tree permission. He's coming into one of the rings of power. And it's the empowering ring, the ring that inspires for resistance, domination, tyranny, these kinds of things. Like, to me, like, knowing Stranger / Gandalf's potential destiny, like, I have a hard time not thinking the storyline plays out. If you would have to know the lore and the details to do what just happened. That's why I said earlier, it makes me feel like that time that 14-year-old goes to sing a special song at church, and then when the first verse is over and they're going the chorus, you're like, I don't hear wavering. They're on pitch. Like, I might consider listening. They get to the first chorus, right? Bombadil shows up, and you're like, ooh, we went to the 5 in this key, and that high note, I didn't hear quivering in the voice, so I think we're good. I might just enjoy it now. What are the lyrics? That's what I feel like's going on. And we know, like, the high note of Gandalf, knowing this is the rings of power, is putting on Narya to a specific point, and no one in the book, right, till the end, knows who's wearing what rings and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, how do you, like, talk me down from just going, I really feel like this, like, is there a reason the showrunners hadn't thought about this? Because I feel like this is what this is lore lore traction, fan fiction that if you knew all the info, you'd like.
Yeah.
That's how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
But it's like the Narya gauntlet. Like, should the stranger have Narya? And does showing up with Tom just wanting a stick actually prepare him to wield a ring?
Oh man, it's so good, and it's such a good question just because there's so many different. What happens with Narya in the Rings of Power are partially dependent on who the stranger is, right? And even in the Peter Jackson films, which they make so many homages to because that's what generally a lot of fans who are consuming it visually are familiar with. And so I can't remember at the end of the extended editions if they reveal that Gandalf had the ring or Elrond. Do they mention that? Or I don't think they do, right? Or do they?
I don't know, because I'd read the books before I watched the movie, so I just remember telling my brother-in-laws who were like little when we were at the theater, I was like, Gandalf has one of the Elvish rings of power, and they're like, I don't see it. And I was like, you can't unless you're a ring bearer.
Yeah, I get it. Obviously not a ring bearer, please.
It's like, I guess I know who you are.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I think in the movies, the only one we find out is just Galadriel, and it's very brief, even though she says, that it's
is to Frodo directly.
Right, exactly. And so people wouldn't be familiar with that. So if it's Gandalf, which I feel very strongly about, minus timeline, we've talked about that, but we see Círdan, and I think it would make sense for the context of the show that we see Gandalf come into his staff, right? Come into this place, his memories. He starts learning more about friendship and cooperation. And as that progresses, he's going to encounter men, elves, whatever, and discover who he is, etc. And at some point, Círdan, through whatever, is going to be like, look, I've got stuff to do. Obviously, you've got a pivotal role to play, because obviously we don't know. Is Ulmo involved in giving him the rings in the water when he tries to throw them away? Is that the Valar? We don't know. And so there would be this neat seeing how Círdan and gives that to Gandalf, and see how the showrunners kind of adapt that and give their own spin on it. But if it's not, and this is where I just feel like Gandalf is right now, is just all the conversations, relationship with Tom, all that stuff, is that the Narya stays with Círdan, and that's where it stays. And I think even though Círdan is amazing and is going to be is a key figure, he's still kind of tertiary. He's not tertiary to the legendarium and the history, but he's tertiary to the narrative. And I think he'll probably will remain so, unless he doesn't. But I don't think that he's going to be a mainstay as far as main character that's developed and stuff. I think the stranger is going to be here from the beginning to the end. And I think Gandalf probably makes the most sense in that context. Yeah.
I just think to myself, I don't even know if we recorded. I know we talked a lot about this, but if you had asked me to like gauge my excitement, if you're a season and a half in, Trip, and we were talking before this started, I would not have expected to enjoy it this much. Like, I would have expected to be disappointed. I would have, we haven't had, there's nothing in this show that has been treated as dirty as Faramir yet. You know what I mean? Like, Faramir, Peter Jackson treated Faramir like Donald Trump treated his wives. If you're pregnant, it's a chance to bang somebody else. You know what I mean? So, like, Faramir got treated nasty in the movies. They try to fix it by sticking some Mordor walking golden nuggets, like right after Faramir has his awakening. But no, Faramir had more of that Bombadil energy in him. And Faramir makes no sense in the Lord of the Rings movies because you don't already have a Bombadil who's just like, oh, I'm putting on the ring. Oh, this is neat. Why are you hiding behind your back? I can see you. Right? Like, you need the possibility of just thinking like, nah, I pray for my enemies. I turn the other cheek. You need someone to just be like, well, obviously Jesus meant it when he gave the Sermon on the Mount in order to understand a prayer of confession when you feel like there's no other option but to resort to violence. And what Lord of the Rings, the films do, and it's not surprising given their context and the complexity of putting Bombadil, but like, it eliminates at the very virtues that Tolkien says that Elrond and company chose to make alive by keeping Bombadil around.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Lord of the Rings doesn't do that. So you get simultaneously, in lieu of the kind of insecurity you have around somebody that takes Jesus' commands to love your enemy seriously. That's one kind of insecurity. Well, what if we exchange that for, what if the tension isn't that, but emo Aragorn, where he's like not sure if he wants to be king, because that ain't in the book.
Right.
Aragorn is like down to crown all the time.
Right.
He's just down to crown. He's walking around with a broken sword, just carrying that junk on purpose.
And then he gets
like,
amended immediately, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Guess what? I'm carrying the Flame of the West because
Yeah.
people will know I'm Aragorn."
yeah, he's DTC, down to crown, and and that but like that shift just makes so much sense, right? If you're an
Yeah.
American,
Right.
that like which voice of the ecosystem of Middle Earth that Tolkien valued so much, he existed before he thought of Middle Earth, kept him in, and was just like, well, there is a point he's here. Namely, the I'm aloof, nonviolent, and find your partisan spectator. Like, I'm a spectator to the partisan battles of power. That guy, we're going to cut him. And also, what are we going to add? A Faramir who's where essentially finite humans never demonstrate the kind of purity that would be like called true virtue, and we're gonna have a king who just becomes emo. So like we have like a new angst point. Like I got more complaint. I love, as someone that rewatches the extended editions 2 or 3 times a year, I have as many complaints about that as I do Rings of Power so far. Except there's more soundtrack material already in 2 seasons. And as someone that I probably listened to like 5 minutes of soundtrack material to 1 minute of actual viewing, unless you count when I go for personal records on kettlebells. I just rewatched the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Heck yeah.
I'm just like, let's go. But I mean, like in my head, this makes sense. You two are both theology nerds. So if it doesn't, you can just say, Trip, you're drunk.
Here's my hope. That as we see more, first of all, that we see more of Bombadil, but that as we see more of the Bombadil stranger dynamic play out, that they don't flatten that virtue complexity into like strategy to beat Sauron, right? That Bombadil, that what my hope is that Bombadil does teach the stranger, and Bombadil is a mentor figure to the stranger, not in the sense of, like Dumbledore, who's going to use a 16-year-old to do all of his dirty work for him, but in the sense of someone who actually is tapped into a depth that the stranger needs to know in order to be a better person, right? Like that Bombadil's concern is so clearly, just in this one episode, his concern for the development of the stranger into the person he has, to use Tolkien language, doomed to be.
Yeah.
That concern is not a concern actually to win a battle here or there. It's a concern that the stranger actually live into who he's doomed to be.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Doomed meaning fated.
Yeah, doomed meaning fated.
Fate.
Right. The very Tolkienian sense.
Yeah.
And this is my hope, is that they keep the complexity. I think the medium gives them the chance to keep the complexity. And I think I really like the idea of Bombadil journeying with the stores, and we get to see some of that complexity as they become Bucklanders. I really loved the very brief throwaway line of, "Why are you here?" Well, this place used to be green, and I had to see it for myself. Like those kind of moments give us a glimpse into this complex virtue. And I think there's actually, and I don't want to, just lean super hard into Tolkien's Catholicism, but there's a sense of Catholic virtue ethics at work in Bombadil that in a really kind of classic sense of the cultivation of the cultivation of virtues is what matters, not because virtues get you an outcome in a particular battle one way or the other, but because cultivating virtues is the way into the beatific vision.
Yeah.
And like I think the medium gives them the chance. And I'm excited to see them live into that complexity and keep that going.
So here, quick follow up, and you say whatever you want, Nick. I don't know if you were the primary editor or not, but Kelly Brown Douglas' book Resurrection Hope.
Yeah.
It has that Bombadil energy.
Mm.
And there's a chapter where she talks about the prophet straight up just laughing in the middle of the problem. And that there's this kind of prophetic energy. We're just laughing at the injustice or laughing at the situation is a means by which the prophet invites the people who are experiencing the situation to differentiate the way their feet are grounded in a situation from the way in which they're invited into divine participation. Right. And so like all of a sudden when you just like start laughing in the face of the oppressor or laughing in the face of injustice or laughing in the face of the dark wizard or, insert this kind of thing, there's this kind of like laughter as an interjection. And that was always like a thing you get with that little in-bit in Lord of the Rings for Tom Bombadil. But this introduction of Tom and then thinking of how Tom functions for Tolkien just in his letters makes like rereading all the letters makes me think Tom Bombadil has more of that laughing energy in the book than I had ever thought. Where what happens, the hobbits are sitting there, right? Like they just straight freaked out. They're freaking ring wraiths on horses. Freaking worms are creeping up when they snort at me. Just think of all the like creepy stuff there. They're like trying to escape all these places. And they even got like random peeps up in the prancing pony getting all wild just because we got some dancing and singing going on and Frodo did a little magic trick. And now they're like trying to report peeps. Like things are getting off and you like get this whole thing. And then like what happens when you finally like with all this energy and tension, like what is it that like sustains them in Fellowship of the Rings? There are these like little breaks. The first one is Tom Bombadil. The second one after Frodo gets stabbed is Elrond. And there's these nourishments. Then after they leave there, you end up getting Galadriel, and then they get traveling nourishments, all of her gifts, which Galadriel's gifts play out as he's the light, the lambus, all this kind of stuff, all the way down to the scouring of the Shire, and now you got some magic dirt to get your party tree back. Why? Because you got to have some party. I mean, that's like a gospel without apocatastasis, some universal reconciliation. And so like once you like see that, to me there's a sense that what's going on with Tom is like the interjection that could seem otherworldly is actually jester energy of the actual other world that's possible. Like it's an eschatological interjection.
And it's an other world that's possible through this world. And I think that's
Amen.
What's so important. It's not an other world that's an escapist locale. It's an other world that is possible through transformed relationships with the other people in this world. And Tom is living those right relationships in a way that makes no sense, purposefully makes no sense. Like there's a holy fool element to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very much like I think the connection to Kelly Brown Douglas is really good there. And I was not the editor on that. My boss was. I think the connection to Kelly Brown Douglas is spot on there. There's an energy with laughter, a theological energy, an ethical energy with laughter that disarms nonviolently, right? Because it right then creates the other world in the face of an attempt of oppression. And I think one of the things that we see with Bombadil, that we feel with I think this is why I felt like he was right before he said anything, is because Bombadil is a feeling that even Tolkien captures in the character in the book. Tolkien captures the feeling of Bombadil regardless of the words, and the words only add depth to the feeling. Nick, I want to hear you.
No, I love everything that y'all said. And just two things that I thought of. One related to your laughter thing is that laughter's all over Tolkien and Lord of the Rings in general. But I think especially in the Scouring of the Shire, there's a part I can't remember. So Frodo, Sam, Pippin, and Merry are rolling up and they're like, what the heck is going on with the Shire? There's ugly buildings. Things are destroyed. There's gates, there's rules posted everywhere. And there's a bunch of hobbits, I think, and possibly some men who are like, hey, if you go one step further, we're going to do something about it. And what do the hobbits do? They bust out laughing. They laugh at them. They're like, yeah, okay, good one. And they're like, oh, you're serious. Okay. So two, and I think about this, I go back to like the tie-in with like the Catholic virtue ethics, but then also this necessary recognition of like the Anabaptist tradition and these things, and how relationships and the way that things happen in the world are absurd, right? Relationship love is absurd. And how where we get the two extremes in Tolkien is we get Melkor, who is extreme discord, right? He is just destruction, chaos. And then we've got Sauron, who's the opposite. He's radical ordering, radical logic, imposition, right? This is the way things are going to be, to the point where I'm going to impose my spirit on all of my army because I can't trust anyone to do what I can do. And Tolkien comes in and says like, no, both of those logics are wrong because there's this imposition going on that's not reflective of reality. And even just tying in Bombadil and then bringing into like interreligious dialogue, Zen Buddhism really focuses on that type of absurdity when it comes to enlightenment, right? I think of this koan all the time of like this master has a kid come in and he makes this, this pupil makes him tea. And he says, every time he comes in, he says, hey, what's enlightenment? And every answer he gets wrong, the Zen master slaps him in the face. Okay. And at one point, the pupil gets really angry and he just throws the teapot against the wall. It smashes. And the Zen Buddhist master goes, yeah, that's enlightenment. And the guy's like, okay. And so he sends him to the next exercise. And the next day he goes, what's enlightenment? And the pupil smashes the pot. He gets slapped in the face again. He's like, no, that's not enlightenment, because there's not this repeat logic. There's this relationship, as you're saying. How do you become yourself in this moment? How does that relationship impact? And there's not just this weird like, oh, I found this formulaic condition to control and also, or I can just destroy everything and burn the Buddha every time, I don't know. So that part, that I might have taken that metaphor a little too far. That doesn't make sense.
No, I like it, and I want to add a third imposition too with Saruman, the radical order that's not I'm going to use my spirit to control you because I don't trust any of you. But the radical order of the radical industrial order,
Yeah.
as another version of imposition that, that just, I mean, talk about blade against bark, just over and over and over. I think that only adds to that observation.
The invisible hand, I even think of like modern day capitalism and the invisible hand kind of being involved in that. And Saruman's like, that's what we got to do, know?
Well, if you love freedom, liberty, and all the other good stuff. There is a really cool philosopher that once said, if you imagine logic and living correspond, then you'll never understand either.
Oh, ooh.
But his name was Al, and I don't trust people named Al. All right, so I have 2 final questions. I'll ask them. You can tell me, Trip, you have to answer first if you're like, I have nothing to say. So just say shit until I have something. All right, so number 1. Next week, what would be the one thing that happens on any of the storylines that makes you text the other 2 of us? And we already know that you're about to rant for a number of minutes with either sheer glee or sheer horror. Like, what could happen next week where I get a text message that's just like, oh, I can't wait till next Monday because junk is going to get wild if they just sent me this text.
I'm thinking of my 2. I know my negative one.
What's your negative one?
Okay.
We've talked about the possibility, but I really don't want the Dark Wizard to be Saruman.
Yeah.
I really want it. It's an Istar, okay? So it's not a witch. It's not the Witch King. It's not Kamul or whatever, which I'm very, very upset about. But I want it to be another blue wizard so bad. Because I don't want them to have to figure out and explain how Saruman dies and comes back or whatever. It just makes it a lot harder to explain the future events of the Lord of the Rings. That's my negative, and then my positive I think will just be, I think whatever happens with Galadriel with Adar, like when that happened, I'm like, that's one of my favorite things ever of last season was like Adar and Galadriel, that dynamic and how Adar's kind of like this shadow to Galadriel. I'm like, I'm ready to see how that turns out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my negative is if the Dark Wizard is Saruman. I was thinking that last week too. I was like, I really hope they're not trying to foreshadow stuff like with his beard, and the way that it kind of almost looks like the beard that Christopher Lee wore. Like I hope that he's not Saruman. And I love halflings just in general. I think unless we get something just monumentally cool in Khazad-dûm. Unless we get something monumentally cool there, which the dwarves have been far and away the standout.
Which is possible.
I love the dwarves. I love everything they've done with Khazad-dûm. Unless we get something monumentally cool there, I think my positive, what I'm looking for and wanting next week is just some more great, like halfling lore development and halfling relationality. Because I think one of the things that people who've only watched the films know is that hobbits live in the Shire and that 4 of them left once.
Right.
And one of them left a few years before that. And that's it. And like this depth of backstory, I really like it. And I also really want to see, and this is connected to why I like Khazad-dûm so much. I also want to see more of the physical space that the stores live in. I want to see more of the town. I want to see more of that little canyon, because it's hidden, but it's not hidden. And there's an element of the little people hiding in plain sight kind of thing that I think is really yeah. I like that.
All right. So I can't decide things I don't want. If Mudworm shows up again, I'm pissed. If that Mudworm shows up, I got nothing. Also, I have no idea what's underneath those peeps' mask that they're like threatening. Like, do you know what's underneath this mask? But I really feel like that's a cell that after the barrel whites, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be that impressive.
Yeah.
And everything I think that would shock me probably won't be on TV. You know?
I better not see a white hand under that mask.
Yeah, it's just like a giant white hand, or it looks like one of those like sandworms from Dune, where they take it off and it just jumps out. They're like, we can't keep it control if we don't keep our mask on. I mean, that's there. Also, if we spend more than 2 minutes on Estrid's betrothed dying, like, obviously he needs to die because that sexual tension is real, and he's got his Riz already leveled up. So, but I just don't need extra time on this.
No.
Just like a swift cut to the neck, end it.
Yeah. Like he just like has a bad interaction and things get awkward. But the on the what I want bit, like I really just want them ends to show back up. I want to see Winterbloom at some other point. I'm not saying this next episode. I'm saying something has to happen for the end of this season where Winterbloom's like, oh, Arondir is my boy, right? That'll make like the Arondir payoff go. They had this like intimate, like, I mean, if Estrid was just like, we're talking straight up going to Pound Town. If people have listened to previous episodes we've had with a lot of Tolkien scholars, it might be.
They're going to be so confused. They're going to be like, which Pound Town are you talking about?
the one people thought we meant. If with a Isildur, like you just much rather much rather have something like, what's more exciting than going to that kind of Pound Town?
Yeah, it's true.
Like, we're talking having straight up we don't need some like quick death, quick love relationship. What I did not anticipate is actually caring about Theo and Isildur's storylines.
Yeah.
And I feel like they both have the potential that over the rest of the season, in 3, 4, and 5 seasons, I might actually care. So I don't want them to shortchange anything where these characters that I was just like, I could mute them. And now I'm like, I don't have to. I don't want them to like use the Estrid line, or like, I just don't want to ruin a storyline.
Yeah.
But the thing that would get me the most pumped, and Nick, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised about this, but the thing that would get me the most pumped is the next episode opens and Adar is standing over Galadriel because he just put her sword and everyone's there. And you know, he's already like, oh, I'm using my elf speak talking to you. So like they do like the flashback and then the story opens and she's doing like, right. So it's coming into focus. She's expecting Adar, but who's there? Waldrick.
I knew it.
And Waldrick is looking at her, and he goes, "Hello, pointy ears," like that. I have no idea what will happen after this, but I just know,
It'd be a
I just
great
know that
reveal.
Jeff from Australia knows how to bring the heat.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
he freaking created Mordor. Like, he killed some little innocent kid because he loves Sauron so much. So what we need is the resurrected Waldrick to straight up be like the tormentor of Galadriel, put her in an elf cell. And at the end of the season, where he's like, "Oh, Junk, you are Sauron," right? And you have this nasty battle. Adar v Sauron. Galadriel's all like chained up and junk. And she's like getting all like, "I gotta get out of here." And Waldrick's like confused, right? You know, he's like, "I love Sauron, but just because his sword sucked juice out of my arm while I held it by myself in my barn in the Southlands, just because I had a sucker sword in my barn for Sauron, a Sauron sucker sword that got bigger as it sucked my arm juice. Just because of that doesn't mean I don't know where my allegiance lies, because I got Adar and I got Sauron here, right? He's confused, like what's going to go on. So what happens? Adar, Sauron, conflict. Galadriel in cage, right?
Yeah.
She's a variable. If you unleash that junk, throw a horse on top and a few chains, that's already like 50 kills right there. Like, she's sitting there like that up here in this corner. And then Waldrick, Sophie's choice. Sophie's choice for Waldrick. Who's going down, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, either I can use the trust of Adar and come up and just straight knife him in the liver. Because L's
Lunch.
Yeah, he can knife him in the lunch. Or I'm not going to go up there. I'm not trying to start nothing with Sauron, because he's my homeboy. So if I want him to go down, I gotta let Galadriel out and give her a horse and some chains. And so he's sitting there, and it's straight up Waldrick's choice. And that is episode 8's title. That's what I'm looking for. Waldrick's choice.
And a very anachronistic train car.
And it's basically like, is he going to either stab Waldrick and be a secret plant for Sauron the whole time, or is he gonna unleash the Lady G with her and hand her, be like, "Here's some chains, a bow, a flaming like stick. I know you can toss this shit up and just shoot some arrows in it. It's got splatter damage." Like, he has to decide, like, where's this gonna go, and that which sets up the between season 2 and 3 on the Waldrick miniseries. Like, part of it will be like just his internal contemplation about Waldrick's choice. Waldrick's choice. Sauron, Adar. Like, how's it go? And if you thought the introduction of a deep ecumenism with the nonviolent witness of Tom Bombadil nested in a deep ecology was problematic for many in the modern world, you just wait till Waldrick's choice shows up. That's...
I will say
just...
Waldrick, we'll get a chance to see Waldrick as the least selfish character in the whole thing, though, because there's no eye in Waldrick. There are 3 eyes, and fuck it, I cast Fireball. And that's how Waldrick solves his choice. Fuck it, I cast fireball.
If Waldrick casts a fireball, that makes me reevaluate my existence, but I would love it.
Adar is close, and so is Sauron. What do you do?
Are they in a 10-meter circle? Yes.
Fuck it.
I cast fireball.
All I know is that the first 2 hours and 30 minutes only had one F-bomb, but the last 10
minutes.
That's their bonus content. If you've made it this far, that's what you get.
You know what's fascinating is there's 100 more people on the live stream right now than when we started. So I don't even know what to do about this. This happened last week. My other live streams, after 10 minutes in, the numbers go down. When it's Rings of Power, it just keeps going up the whole time. And it just makes me think that people should have really given there are different hermeneutics, right? When you're reading if you're planning Rings of Power and reading Lord of the Rings, some people give a hermeneutical priority to the Waldrick,
Right.
and that's its own key. But you got to admit, right? Like, if the final season, like in one area, the final episode, if in one area it's just like Sauron's doing banner material with Celebrimbor, like you're like, and then Adar's like in the back, like kind of orchestrating junk, and Galadriel's sitting there, and then Waldrick is just like Waldrick's choice. Do you want to like give her a horse and some chains, maybe a lantern and a bow, and let her go to town? Or do you want to,
I'm thinking, here's the thing. I'm putting money on letting Galadriel go, because what Sauron does is he's a master manipulator. And if they do it right,
manipulator?
Sauron is like, hey, you just won. You just escaped. And if Waldrick's, the man he is, he's going to pick up on that. He's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to let you go. And then Galadriel's like, oh, wow, thank you, Waldrick. And then Galadriel's like, I just did this. And Waldrick's like, I made Mordor. And guess what? I just made Sauron and killed Adar. Boom.
Mm-hmm. He's like, my bank has a lot of deposits. I got Maiar, Ishtar, elves, dwarves. They all owe me something. And then there's that one little boy, Theo. I hope he's advanced politically, because he's got an
lord
arm
of something.
I hope he's a lord of something, because he's got some blood suck stains from my hilt on his arm too. Oh, all right. I don't know if y'all have anything else to say, because I want y'all to know the volume of self-editing I've had throughout this endeavor has gone up dramatically. This has been complete joy and fun. Tom, thank you for joining for some Tom on Tom.
Yeah.
Action.
Thank you for having me.
And if for some reason you're in the 114 people who chose to listen the entire time, or the other 118 people that joined after we started and are still here, or something in between, you clearly should come to Theology Beer Camp in cosplay, win some book prizes, smoke this junk with some sweet Lord of the Rings theme graphics. And next week we'll be talking about whatever happens this week, because I don't have a social life, so I just have to come up with reasons to hang.
It's a good one.
With Nick on the internet.
and cause your wife to yell at you.
I know. I don't know. But hopefully, how many things haven't been on TV before where you can have multiple in one episode?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if they were just like, oh, this episode is a prologue, and they like straight up had Bram McCreary do the freaking on the Lindalay, and then there's like straight up like you're on psychedelics, graphics and junk as the whole world comes into being. Like if that happened, I couldn't even imagine what our conversation would be like. It would just be like us sitting here with our mouths open, excited. I would call him up and be like, I'm a bear. You're a bear. Do you want to talk? I can send you an Amazon gift card. Like, what if there was a like this is the other thing. If Rings of Power had actually started with a whole On the Lindalay episode, real Tolkien purist, if it was mediocre, right? Like if it was moderately accurate, they would have had to gone into a cave for a week just to recover from the sheer excitement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, that would be a gangster move. Like if like one of the season 5, right? They've been doing the prologue with the music and the moving the sand around with the vibes. Like, what if they were like doing that and it like dissolves into the freaking like beginning, whatever way they should just like give them some money. They should just give the Tolkien estate some money for the beginning of the Silmarillion. And then they did it and they were like, Bear, like we need you to rock this junk out. And he's like, game on.
Done.
Well, what if there was like 56 minutes, it was perfect, and all of a sudden Tom Bombadil just danced across the top of it.
But like 2000s quality CGI, like just not.
like remember the little dog in the Windows 95 screensaver?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that. All right, we'll talk to y'all next week. Tom, I'm sorry. This went an hour longer than you expected.
It was wonderful.
I hope no one in your home is upset at us.
My wife's in Chicago tonight.
Oh, well, I feel much better.
Yeah.
I feel much better. I mean, I have to pack lunches in 6 hours, but, you know.
Yeah.
There's not another person since I quieted up. All right. Thank y'all for hanging out.